Hello and welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to talk about wrist circles as they apply to piano technique. Over the years, I've made several videos about wrist circles on this channel, and many of you have asked some very good and insightful follow-up questions that you've left either in the comments or by sending me emails. So today, I thought it would be fun to gather all the questions that viewers have been asking me about wrist circles and answer them in one video. Overall, I was able to distill the many wrist circle related questions that you sent to me into basically three categories of questions. So here are the three questions I'm going to answer today. The first question is, how do wrist circles help with finger independence, arm weight transfer, and tension-free playing? The second question is, why do you recommend counterclockwise wrist circles in both hands? And is it okay if I use this approach universally, for example, when I play Hanon? And the third question that you asked was, when would you use clockwise instead of counterclockwise wrist circle motion? And what situations or techniques benefit from this exception? So in this video, I'm going to go over what wrist circles are, why I usually recommend counterclockwise motion in both hands, and I'll show you specific examples of cases when I would use both counterclockwise motion and clockwise motion, as well as my rationale for each example. We've got a lot to cover, so let's get started. I want to start off by talking about what the purpose is of using wrist circles as opposed to not using any wrist motion at all. The purpose of wrist circles is to help your hand group your fingers and notes into larger gestures so that you are not isolating each individual finger and playing it separately from the hand. Here's what the difference looks like. If I play a 4-note triad and I'm only using my fingers, then that's what it looks like. You can see that there's some tension here in my muscles. You can see my fingers are curved a little bit more. And if I want to do chord inversions, the other thing I want you to notice is that all of the notes are approximately the same volume when I do this. I'm playing each finger independently. When I use a wrist circle, what I'm doing is I'm grouping 4 notes into one physical gesture. What that allows me to do is to drop my wrist on the first note and then carry through. It's like a scooping motion on the other 3 notes. We call it a wrist circle because the wrist basically goes around in a circle, like you're tracing a circle in the air with your wrist. You can actually try that. This is one of my favorite exercises for wrist circles, is just put the fall board down and draw a circle with your wrist. And then you will start to experience that scooping motion as you go down and under. Okay, so you can hear also that not all the notes sound equal. I'm hearing the first note is more, that's where my wrist drops, and then the other 3 notes are follow through. This is useful because not every note in music is going to be equal. Just like in speech, not every syllable that we say has an equal weight. This is one of my favorite exercises to do when learning wrist circles and practicing them, and that's the 4-note arpeggios and inversions. So you come, so that's going up, going down and under. Then I do a quick up and over to find my new position. Up and over, down and under, up and over. Now, coming down, I'm not going to scoop down and go this way. I'm going to go up and over, up and over, up and over. So then you can start to see that generally when you go upward to the right on the piano, you're going down and under. And then when you're coming down, you're going up and over. So it kind of completes the full circle. Up and over, down and under, up and over. So you can even practice it this way. So when are we going to use wrist circles? Typically, we're going to use wrist circles when we have passage work or arpeggiated figures that are going up and down, because the wrist helps us group those notes into musical gestures. One common place that a lot of people like to use wrist circles, and use that as an example, is the Hanon exercises. So if we look at the very first Hanon exercise, we start by dropping into the thumb, then going down and under. Then when we hit the fifth finger, we go up and over, and then down and under. Okay? Now what you'll notice is that by dropping on the thumb, I'm emphasizing that note just a little bit. So I'm hearing. And what that does is it helps it sound more musical than if I were just going. I can't really hear any notes louder than the others. And the note that the thumb is playing is an important melodic note because that's the place where the pattern shifts. So using wrist circles is a win-win for us when we're playing a figure like Hanon because it reduces physical tension in the hand and it also helps bring out important melodic notes by dropping with the wrist and therefore dropping a little bit more arm weight on the part of the beat that is emphasized. If I were, okay, and so that's where we get into the question of what direction should the wrist circle go. In the right hand, typically, you're going to want to do a counterclockwise circle. You can do wrist circles in both directions. A lot of times it does depend on the context. But I have found in my own playing and in my own teaching and in looking at different passage work and analyzing what direction the wrist circle makes the most intuitive sense, that more often than not, the wrist circle is going to be counterclockwise. So we go down and under, up and over. Now, what does it look like and sound like if I do the opposite? If I do a clockwise circle in the right hand. So I'm going up on the thumb, up, and then I'm dropping on the pinky. What that does, if you listen, I'm dropping my weight into the 5, right? It's making the thumb lift it out, and it makes the 5 louder. However, this starts on the downbeat. So I don't necessarily want the second beat to be louder than the first beat because the emphasis is not on. Therefore, in this context, this explains why a counterclockwise circle is going to work really well. And often in the right hand, things are written in such a way that the strong beat is going to be on the thumb. Not always, but often. For example, I'm looking just randomly at Beethoven's Opus 79, Sonata in G major, the second movement, and I'm looking again, fairly randomly, at these places where I would use wrist circles in the right hand, measure 15, and I have these ascending triads. Notice that the first note of the triad is on a beat. And then, so I'm using the motion of the wrist to help emphasize that shape, that musical shape. In measure 16, it continues. So I'm dropping with my wrist every third note. If I were to do a clockwise circle, it would work against the beat pattern and I would be bringing out pinky. It just doesn't feel or sound as logical, either musically or technically. Let's talk about the left hand. A lot of you had questions about the direction that the left hand wrist circle should go. And I want to start off by saying that wrist circles can go in both directions. And if you are feeling like you aren't sure, just try it both ways and start to understand what feels best for you intuitively. I want to tell you a little bit about my own experience with this journey, because when I first made my very first video about wrist circles, my assumption was that because the hands are symmetrical and because the motion we're doing is generally going to be clockwise and counterclockwise in the right hand, and we're moving away from the thumb, that also, therefore, by generally in the left hand, we would move the opposite direction. We would move in clockwise wrist circles. So that was my assumption, basically, when I first started really thinking more deeply about this topic. However, I have found that most of the time, the left hand also moves in counterclockwise motion. Now, I'm going to explain why I've come to that conclusion. And before I do, I want to say there are cases when the left hand can move in clockwise motion and where it makes more sense to. But let's talk a little bit about what the wrist circle is doing. And I'm going to just use this example from Opus 79 by Beethoven since it's open in front of me. And an example of using wrist circles is here in measure 10. We have this up, back and forth arpeggiated. Okay, now what we want to hear emphasized is the beginning of each beat, right? We have 6 notes per beat, and we don't want the thumb to stick out on the third note. We don't want it to be... Okay, so that's the first thing. If I go clockwise in my wrist circle motion, I would come up and over, and then I would drop on my thumb, then go down and under through the pinky, and then up and over again to the thumb. Now, the thing is that in music, I have found after looking at a lot of it, specifically looking for wrist circles, the arpeggiated notes and bass motion usually comes from the bottom. So what we're going to do is we're going to drop into the first note, which happens to be a 3. We're going to go down and under because that part we want to be stronger. Then we come up and over. We're lifting the weight out with our arm. That's the purpose of lifting the wrist. And then we drop into the 3. Okay, so what's happening? We're not literally dropping on 5 in this case. We're transitioning and then we're dropping into 3. So that's an example of why wrist circles work well in this context. Let's go back to the 4-note arpeggio that I showed you at the beginning, earlier in this video. If I am going counterclockwise, I'm going to go down on my pinky, follow through on the next 3 notes. Then I go up and over, I drop. So it's the same principle. I want to hear when I do. I don't want to hear. All right, that's unless the first 3 notes are a pickup. Something like that. That might be an example where I would do a clockwise motion. However, these examples do not come as often as you might think in the literature. Now let's talk a little bit about Hanon. A lot of you were confused and had questions about Hanon because I talk about doing counterclockwise circles in both hands, and some people talk about doing opposing circles in Hanon specifically. And so I want to just say, again, you can do wrist circles in both directions, but let's just talk specifically about Hanon. And I'm going to show you that if we do the left hand down and under, we're scooping these notes, and then we're light on the thumb, which tends to be a heavy finger anyway. So we're using the lifting wrist to help lift the weight out on the thumb. So that's one justification for using wrist circles in the counterclockwise way on Hanon. If I do it the opposite, that's what it looks like. Now, if I'm playing hands together, I'm going to want the hands to be moving in similar motion. So if I do these counterclockwise circles, it actually feels quite easy. And then I'm dropping my weight at the same time, which is on the beat. Drop, drop, down and under, up and over. Now, some people were saying that they do wrist circles. They said that they've been told to do wrist circles. Now, this is I don't want to say other people are wrong because I think there are many ways to do this. This is why I personally do not do clockwise circles in the left hand while doing counterclockwise circles in the right hand. Sure, if you are doing something like that feels nice, right, to have the opposing circles. However, in practice, for me, it doesn't feel comfortable to be lifting my weight in one hand while I'm dropping my weight in the other hand, because that is one of the purposes of wrist circles, as I said before, is to help manage the dropping and lifting of weight out of the keys. So if I do clockwise circles with the left hand and counterclockwise circles with the right hand, this is what it looks like. It's actually a little bit hard for me to coordinate that. So I'm technically doing as instructed, which is the left hand goes that way and the right hand goes that way. And intellectually, that makes a lot of sense because our hands are symmetrical. However, the music is not constructed in a symmetrical way where everything emanates from both of the thumbs. If you're enjoying this video so far, you can have more of my content delivered straight to your inbox. You can do that by signing up for my newsletter, which is called Notes from the Piano Prof. It has practice strategies, resources, behind the scenes info, and more. It's completely free, and if you change your mind, you can unsubscribe at any time. I'll put the link to subscribe in the description below this video, or you can hit the QR code right there. Now let's keep talking about wrist circles. Now I want to take you through a few quick examples of how I apply wrist circles and decide which direction to do the wrist circles. The first one I want to show you is Mendelssohn Venetian Boat Song, Opus 19, number 6, the one that goes. That's what it does. So we have this pattern, and so we have a bass note in the fifth finger. We want to drop our weight into that. We want to do a counterclockwise wrist circle, go down and under. Then we're lifting out, and then we're down. So this is what the wrist circle feels like inside my wrist. It's not a literal circle, right? It's like kind of an ellipse. It's kind of an oval. And it's the feeling of the motion that I'm going not straight up and down. I'm not going like that and then moving my hand. I'm going that and over to the right. So that's kind of the metaphor. Now, if I were to do it the opposite, what I would be doing is lifting my weight out of the fifth finger, and then I'm dropping into the thumb here, but then my thumb is already going to be kind of inclined to be heavy, so I don't want to give it extra weight because it's so easy to accidentally accent it. So therefore, my wrist circle, instead of being clockwise, is going to be counterclockwise, down. All right, so that's the reason in this one. All right, so and I'll just show you in context. And what happens when I do that, you see my right hand is moving. I'm emphasizing the beats with my wrist a little bit. And so both hands have the symmetry of dropping in to the keys at the same time. All right, that's that one I wanted to talk about. The second one I want to talk about is a Waltz by Franz Schubert, Waltz in B minor. And so we have this motion. You see this a lot in waltzes. You drop on the bass, you go down and under, you lift your chords, and then the second lift, the top of the wrist circle, brings you down to the left hand. Down. Okay, now, really technically, I suppose you would call this an arm circle. I used to make a bigger differentiation between the two, but actually it is still motion that the wrist is basically initiating and shaping. So this is what it would sound like. So again, I don't want to go up, down, down, up, down, down, up, down, which would be clockwise, because then I'm ending up going against the beat pattern, and also the hands are not in sync when it comes to the use of arm weight. All right, the next example I want to share with you is from Chopin B minor sonata, the last movement. We have this passage at 207. This is very typical of Chopin's writing. You hear this in a lot of his virtuosic works. So this is just one example. So this is the place where we have etc. So I'm at 207. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop into the pinky, then I'm going to go down and under, up and over on the top, on the descending part of that arpeggio, and then down and under. If I did the opposite, again, I would be emphasizing the middle of the beats, and that would also make it much harder to coordinate the hands together. Obviously, when something's really super fast, I'm not doing an excessive amount of wrist motion anyway. It's more how I'm grouping things and how I've practiced it slowly. Okay, I just did that clockwise. Now I'm all confused. Okay, dropping it this way. What you might find is that sometimes it's useful to try going down and under this way, and other times it might be useful to try it clockwise and see what feels more comfortable to you. Okay, now I'm going to show you a couple of examples of where I would use clockwise left hand wrist circles. The first example, somebody left me a question on a comment, which I'm grateful for. Thank you all very much for your comments and your emails. I've gotten so many emails and so many comments from engaged pianists and learners from all over the world. It's just amazing to be part of this community of people who are just passionate about the piano and its music and playing the piano and learning to be better at it is just incredible. So thank you everyone for leaving your questions. I am only one person and I am a full-time university professor with many responsibilities through my university position and to my in-person students at the university. So I don't have time to fully engage with each and every comment or email. I do my best, but just know that I do read everything. So thank you. Now I'm going to talk about Opus 25 number 1 Etude. Okay, so this is the Aeolian harp. Now what happens here is our hands are moving in symmetrical motion. So what I do advocate is the right hand doing counterclockwise wrist circles, left hand doing clockwise, because we come away from the thumb toward the pinkies. Right, so we want that motion. Now, why after saying like we want to emphasize the beats, am I not advocating clockwise in the right hand and counterclockwise in the left hand? And it's simply because we don't want to have a feeling of like there's so much more to this etude that we want to hear the interior of each chord. So we need to hear. So we want to have this feeling. So even though I'm lifting, I'm giving it a little bit of a ping on my pinky. Okay, so that's an example where I would use clockwise circles in the left hand. Another example is in Chopin's first impromptu. Let me find that. I want to talk about the middle section. So where we go. Here, the left hand is, the chord is on the strong part of each measure. He's intentionally kind of like turning it a little cattywampus. Typically, we would hear 1, 2, 1, right? Typically, like the typical motion would be, the bass note would be on the strong beats, but here he goes 1, 2, 3, 4. Are we in cut time? Yeah, so 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1. So you can see I'm already doing it. I'm going clockwise circles because I'm lifting out of the pinky. I'm dropping into the chord with a little bit of emphasis. And then I'm lifting. So the effect is You can try that both ways. I mean, it can't hurt you to play that counterclockwise instead of clockwise, but that's my reasoning for using clockwise wrist circles in the left hand in a section like that. Wrist circles are one of the 5 foundations of piano technique that I teach to my students. If you're not familiar with these foundations, check out my playlist of videos where I go over each of the 5 foundations in more detail. You can watch it just by clicking right up there in the corner. If you like this video, please be sure to like it, subscribe to my channel, and share this video with someone who might find it helpful. It really does help me reach more people. I'll see you in the next video. Happy practicing!